Welcome to the Door County Reads 2022 Festival. My name is Rebecca. Today's event is Door County Reads NWTC book discussion group. We'll be discussing Population 485, Meet Your Neighbors One Siren at a Time by Michael Perry. Let's see, and before we get going, there's just a little housekeeping that we need to do. This program may touch on varying points of view. We thank you for being open to hearing each other's opinions and participating in intellectual freedom in a respectful manner.
Okay. Well, welcome. Today we have two leaders of the group from NWTC. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Lisa Tetzloff, and I manage the NWTC Center in Sister Bay.
And my name is Stephanie Cataldo-Pebek, and I work with Lisa at the NWTC Center in Sister Bay.
And my name is Laura Kayakan. I'm the Adult Services Librarian in Sturgeon Bay. And we do have someone joining us here in a minute. And this book discussion is on one of the two books that we had for the program. This is Population 485. The other book was Truck, a Love Story. Did everyone have a chance to read both books or just one book? Welcome, Patty. Would you like to join the discussion? So Lisa and Stephanie, did you have any questions or any subjects you'd like to talk about?
Well, it's funny. Stephanie and I have been talking about this book quite well, really since we started reading it. And then as we were talking about what questions we might ask a group or whatever, and I don't know, just kind of some thoughts about, I mean, I enjoyed this book. I like the structure of the book and that it was almost multiple short stories. I like the humor and how touching some of the stories were. He added some history. And I connected with the book in a variety of ways. My husband was a fire commissioner for Egg Harbor for many years. So that I was always hearing stories about the volunteer firefighters and the EMTs. In particularly in our area, and they've actually been to our home a few times for one reason or another. I also connect with him as a runner. I used to run in country roads, and so I connected with that. And then the whole idea of I think we can all kind of connect with the small town Wisconsin kind of community elements of it. And so I don't know, Stephanie, you want to say anything like overview or summary or some thoughts?
Sure. Well, I really enjoyed the book as well. And I came into it with a lot of the same thoughts that Lisa did. I moved to Door County in about 2015, so I'm not from here originally. And one thing that her and I were discussing a lot was, you know, when you move to a new community, how do you fit in and where is your place in that community? And I think that's what I enjoyed about this book, because we learned a lot about that. Now, he had grown up in his town and then came back, which I thought was interesting. But I think, you know, just learning about the way he got to know his community through his servants as an EMT was super fascinating. I'll be honest with you, I think I gained a new appreciation for what the volunteers do and what they sign up for. And I don't know that I had ever really thought about that very deeply. And so that was a really great takeaway for me from the book, is just to really gain an understanding of why these people are so important and what they really bring to the table, which they don't have to, they volunteer to do it. And some of the things they see that have got to be really hard. So I think that's one of the things that the book did for me. And I do also love the stories. He's a good storyteller, and I like the way he talked about the different people in his town. The only thing I thought is, if you were his friend,
Yeah.
You would have to be careful because you would probably end up in his book. And I've often wondered how they all felt about that, because it's a small town. And I kept thinking, you know, I actually had to look up where New Auburn was on a map. And I thought, well, I've never been there, but I've been close. And I'm like, I kind of want to go there now and see the gas station. I was just really intrigued with the town. But then I thought, man, there's probably people I'm reading about that are still working there and living there. And that would be interesting to be that person who had been written about.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and I agree with you. I kept thinking that too, but in some interview, I think he did the 2 movies that we showed here, the PBS movies, but then on top of it, he talked to Larry Miller
Yep.
on National Public Radio or local Wisconsin Public Radio about those 2 movies, and he told some of the background of them. And he did say somewhere along the line that he changes names and checks with people to make sure they're okay with being included in the book. So I don't think he just does it without that thought behind it.
Mhm.
And he does mention that his parents are kind of humble and don't want to have draw too much attention. But to me, they're the really fascinating couple of people. I want to know more about them. Someone in another book group mentioned that the book Coop is a lot about his parents. And I started that one, but haven't gotten very far yet. Has anyone read Coop?
I haven't, but
may
I
have,
was,
a long time ago. Yeah.
oh yeah, I thought his mother was fascinating. And
Yeah.
one of the things that Lisa and I were talking about is if you could sit down and have lunch with any one of the characters, who would you want it to be? And I think she's my pick, because
Mhm.
there's a lot more to her story that I think would be interesting to hear.
Mhm.
Yeah, and the fact that he talks about them being very religious, and he talks about himself not being religious, but his behavior to me is modeling what he was taught
Yeah.
by his parents in so many ways. I mean, even the fact he went into nursing, just like his mother,
Mhm.
and that they're both on the fire group,
Mhm.
volunteer fire department. So I
And his
think they're,
brothers too. Mhm.
yeah, the brothers too, and they're all a little different. Like the one is good at fixing things and logging.
Yeah.
I can think of logging as an old-fashioned sort of skill, but apparently he's big on that still. Does
Mhm.
anyone know much about logging?
I don't.
Yeah,
But yeah,
I
his
know.
brothers seemed, it must have been an interesting household when you have someone who's, an artist, truly an artist, and then the other brothers seem like they're more involved in really manual labor, very farming and doing that kind of work.
Mhm.
And then they all kind of convene through their volunteer firefighting and EMTs,
Yeah.
even though they're very different. They all kind of come together in that way, which is very cool. I thought very cool.
And if anyone hasn't had a chance, last night Kagan from Crossroads did a really excellent talk on community, and how when she first came here, she saw how different groups of the community were getting together to help other people in just this way that it appears in the book. And I'd highly recommend watching that. It's going to be on YouTube, and I think there's a Zoom version of it also.
Mhm.
So I'd recommend that.
I agree with you. I think that this community does tend to pull together when somebody needs help. I think I was just reading the other day about a fire in Southern Door and how
Yeah.
the community's coming together to help that family. So I think that you find that in small communities, New Auburn, but also here in Door County as well.
Mhm. The Fire
and the-
Chiefs Association did a holiday meals where a bunch of people came here and made pies in the commercial kitchen here in Sister Bay. That was 2 holidays ago. Anyway, so the fire chiefs all got together and did that. I mean, they do so many very cool things.
Yeah, we're lucky. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact we have so many strong little villages, and yet no one's too large. So it's kind of a special mix here.
Well,
There's
and
no
I often think
dominating.
too, with Door County, it's not like we can rely on neighboring counties to the same degree that other places can, because we have water on a lot of sides. So we're kind of stuck
Isolated.
here on our own with each other. So I think in some ways that means we have to look out for each other because, you know, it seems, and I'm sure Lisa can comment on this more with her experience with her husband, but it seems like the departments very much back up each other. They come to different communities when the call is necessary. The collaboration, I'm sure, is absolutely key, but really seems to function very well.
Mhm. Yeah, I think he called it mutual aid. They'd call it mutual aid call. So even like when Shipwrecked burned, there were fire departments there from all over Door County. And they know, they have it all set up where they know who, you know, so it was the Egg Harbor Fire Department that was in charge and the rest of them just followed whatever the Egg Harbor Fire Department chief, you know, decided was going to be the role of the Bug Fire Department or Southern Door or whatever. And it worked. I mean, it's pretty amazing how it works, but I think a lot of those people also know each other because they work together so much. But it's pretty cool. Pretty cool. I can't imagine being, you know, I imagine in a big city, you're a firefighter or EMT, and you're mostly never going to be responding to somebody you know. Whereas these people, you know, they're responding to their neighbors, you know, and I think about even the last chapter of the book with his sister-in-law dying in the car accident, you know, and your family's going to be, you know, even his brother thought, well, that my wife was probably going to be traveling that road, and then to go to an accident and find out it's your family member, that adds just I don't know, that an extra dimension of, I think, I don't know, difficulty, but maybe, I don't know.
It's like the pioneers in a way. I mean, they couldn't depend on some big, huge outside force to come and save them.
I'm really glad he wrote that last chapter, though. I think that chapter was really summed up the book really well in that he could draw together, you know, an experience with, you know, with a horrible accident, but also, you know, how it impacted his family. And I'm really glad he was able to, that his brother was okay with him writing about it, because I think it really was a very poignant story in the book.
Yeah, and I read this book a while ago now. Didn't he end with the wedding of the brother? And then he ended with a wedding in truck also. He likes to end. Okay. He likes his own wedding. He likes to end with weddings. So he does give a very positive curve to his books, even though he's dealing with some very, very heavy subjects, which is, you know, what you're just mentioning. But somehow he takes a positive attitude towards them, or makes you see them in a positive way.
Right. Right.
And you mentioned earlier that he's an artist, and that's one thing that he keeps saying over and over. He's not good at the mechanical side of fixing the truck, and he's not good at being organized. He's a little scatterbrained. And the one thing I noticed about him, his writing style, he is observing every little tiny detail, and he's able to put it down in words. And my sister's a fine artist, I mean, painting and pastels and things. And I feel like I can't draw at all, but she keeps saying, you just have to look carefully at something and then you can do it. You know, so it's like, how do you learn to be an artist? You just observe something in minute detail and then put it into another form. And he's doing that with the words. And
and he's very good at it. I really enjoy that. He is very descriptive, and you can very much be there.
Yeah.
Even that run, the one chapter that really is just a long run of his, and then he connects it to different things he sees and, you know, what happened there or whatever. I mean, it just felt like I was going along. I feel like, like you were talking about, Stephanie, I feel like I could go out there and see these roads that if I drove there, I'd see that's what he was talking about. That's what he was talking about in such detail. I wonder if he carries around a little notepad, you know, just to remember, although that's very low tech, but, you know, to remember things.
I think he did say somewhere along the line that he does take notes like that. Where did I hear that? I can't remember now. But yeah, I think he really does that sort of thing. And imagine how much he's putting out all the time. That's the thing that amazes me, because he's on the radio, he's on, television, he goes to talks all over the place, and he's in a band, and he does that Chautauqua type thing, what's it called? So he's got to be writing all the time, constantly.
But Laura, didn't he say, I think in one of those movies that you showed from PBS, he said that his dad always had more than one stream of income. So he did the dairy, but he did something else. And so he got that from his dad. So he said, I'm a writer, but I've thrown in musician, I've thrown in speaking, because his revenue sources were then a little more spread out. And he learned that, and he gave his dad credit for that. And the way his dad, earned money was the same way he kind of saw it.
Yeah, and he also said in a number of places that he lives a life where he's always doing triage. Did you hear that? Because he has so much going all the time, he has to do the thing that's due tomorrow first.
Oh,
Get that done. Did you hear that? When he gave a talk about last Saturday, he was talking about, he wrote one young adult book. And someone asked him if he was going to write a sequel to that. And he said, actually, he has it in the plans, but there's no deadline. So he keeps putting it off and doing what needs to get done right now first. So in a way, that's a very rich life to have so much going on. But
well, he must do a ton of research. I mean, he was digging into the history of that town.
Yeah.
And digging out historical documents from that town.
From New Auburn.
Pulling out all kinds of stuff.
Right,
So,
Lisa, and didn't he even take us back to like New York, where the other guy named a town Auburn, so then they had to be New Auburn, and how that all unfolded? I mean, it was...
Right,
and he does,
he's got to have his head in microfilm somewhere doing some of this stuff.
Yeah, he also in Truck, the thing I loved about that is I like historical research too, and little twists and turns like that. And he starts out talking a lot. I've told many people who come in the library, he starts talking about Irma Harding, who was the mascot for the International Harvester Company, which is the kind of truck he fixed. And Irma Harding was like a Betty Crocker character, or just a sort of made up character, but people would play her, and she would be selling refrigerating systems and things. And she actually came to Door County, which I think is really fun.
Yeah.
She came to a orchard in Forestville, and it's in the old newspapers if you look it up. So I got a kick out of her. And then he also had a long thing about the man who created the logo for the International Harvester. So part of his writing style is giving a lot of background research that he's done on, to really bring things out and make a point about these things.
And I think that comes across in Population 485. He describes the town in a way you can envision it, even if you haven't been there. And certainly living in a small community like we do in Door County, I think there were a lot of relatable things that he said about his town that we could probably relate to here. And one of the things I thought about when reading that chapter about Beagle was there's always going to be these really interesting characters. And it seems like when you're in a small town, a lot of people know these interesting characters like he was.
And do you think his books translate to the rest of the country or the world? That's one thing that's been brought up a number of times. Is he so Midwestern that, they don't understand him on the coast? And yet he has been on bestseller lists.
Right. I think as a Midwesterner, you'd have an edge on understanding it. I'm not saying that you couldn't gain an understanding. I mean, everybody probably knows firefighters, even if they live on the West Coast or wherever, but understand some of the things, the nuances he's explaining. It's probably easier if you come from here.
Yeah.
His beer tent or whatever they do for that one weekend where they're raising money, and he's talking about how he just likes to man the beer tent or whatever. And I mean, that's a very Wisconsin thing that he's describing there. And we all get it because we've been to the beer tent in Bailey's Harbor or wherever. But I think people somewhere else might be like, okay, that's a little weird that everybody comes there and it's like the big thing in the town. And we get it because we've been there, but maybe it would be harder for someone who doesn't come from this area to quite understand that.
Yeah, alcohol is treated differently here, isn't it? From other
It is.
places.
That is.
Beer. And one thing I did when I was looking this up, I lead a group called the Multicultural Book Group, and we read books from other countries and different cultures. And so I often go to something called Worldcat Identities. Worldcat's a sort of international library catalog.
Okay.
And you can see their data about authors, like if they're translated into multiple languages. And sometimes I'll look up and see if the books have different covers and are called different things in different languages. But Michael Perry has not been translated into anything except English. And that's kind of interesting. Someone asked him if he knows Nicholas Butler. Have any of you read Nicholas Butler?
No, I
No.
He's
haven't.
another Wisconsin author. He wrote a book, the one I read not too long ago, Shotgun Love Songs. He's
Okay.
from over in La Crosse area, and he is a friend of Michael Perry. He said they're buddies and talk to
Okay.
each other now and then. And he writes a similar sort of book. But what's interesting to me is Nicholas Butler has won prizes in France for his books. Now, how does that happen? That one real Wisconsin author is notable in France, and another one is just here and barely, he does go on the coast and around the country, but not so much international. Did you have something to say, Patty?
No, just clearing my throat. I'm
Okay.
listening with interest.
Did you get a chance to read the book
Long ago.
long ago?
Mhm.
And what did you think?
Oh, we enjoyed all of them we have read.
I'm glad to
He's a
hear it.
very entertaining.
Yeah.
We grew up in a small town in Missouri, have been on Kangaroo Lake for almost 30 years, and we can relate. Small towns in Missouri were very much like this.
Mhm.
Yes. Midwest still, right?
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
Where everybody knows everyone, Patty.
Pretty much.
And
Uh,
sometimes that's a good thing and
um,
sometimes not.
Mhm.
Well, that's like family, you know. Uh, our claim to fame was that Walt Disney spent several years of his childhood in our little town, and
Oh,
generations before went to the same elementary school my husband and I did, and he often came back to visit when we were kids, and
wow.
took a lot of movies on the school grounds. We would love to see those movies today. Our favorite story about Walt Disney, our son was 6 when Walt came back to dedicate the new elementary school in his honor. And we had prompted Michael, if you should get a chance, go up to Mr. Disney and say, Mr. Disney, may I shake your hand? And at the end of Walt's talk, he did invite people to come and cross the stage and speak to him. And our little boy went up and stuck out his hand and said, almost as rehearsed, Mr. Disney, would you like to shake my hand?
That's awesome.
No, that's a good story.
And
Mhm.
Walt said, yes, he would love to shake his hand, and did. And I,
Wow.
who have recorded every moment of our kids' lives on film, did not get that picture, unfortunately.
Mm.
What year were these things happening, and were the films being made?
Well, we attended that school starting in 1944. And after the war years, at least, Walt and Roy and their wives came back every year.
Wow.
Stayed
Yeah.
with good friends of ours. And it was just a good time. He was very much a small town boy. although he only lived. Oh, I've got another story from you, from that same occasion when he was dedicating the elementary school. Up on the stage beside him was a tiny, very old little woman in a wheelchair. And she wasn't introduced at the beginning of the program, and everyone wondered who that was up there sitting next to Walt. And at the end of the program, he said, well, I have a story for you. We moved to Marceline when I was 5 and lived next door to the school superintendent and his wife. And one night, my parents had to be out of town, and Roy was a little older. He was 7 or 8, and I was 5, and we were with the superintendent's wife, and a terrible thunderstorm came up. And Roy was brave, and he didn't cry, but I did. I was scared. So the wife took me into bed with her to comfort him, and he put his arm around this little old lady and said, and to this day, this is the only redhead I've ever slept with. And she just giggled and giggled. He was delighted. He modeled Main Street in Disneyland, he said, after the Main Street in our little hometown, which is
Wow.
like Bailey's Harbor. It has just one Main Street with a few businesses. And that town was selected to host his 100th birthday celebration 21 years ago. It was the same year as 9/11. And unfortunately, the celebration occurred the weekend after 9/11. The town had rented chairs and wagons to transport people between activities and events. And of course, very few people came because of 9/11.
Yeah.
And Walt had died several years before. But we were there, Howard and I, and the grandson and his wife and their 2-year-old daughter. And it was wonderful for those of us who could attend because the crowd was so slight. Unfortunate for the town. But Disney had sent street lights in the shape of Mickey Mouse's head to go every place on Main Street where there have been a street light. They have premiered movies there. The stamps that were drawn in honor of Disney movies have been released first at that little post office. It's been a wonderful boon for the town.
So you really know small town life, which is
We
what
do, and
Michael Perry writes about. And wasn't it kind of fun to read something like this after all of the last couple of stressful years we've had?
Mhm.
It was nice to go into a different world, a small,
yes.
friendly
Yeah, I
community.
agree. Mhm.
Did you have any questions that you were thinking about the book, Patty? Or anything?
No, I don't think.
Have you read anything else?
Particularly.
What?
Have I read anything else? We
By-
have read all of his books.
All of his
Uh,
books.
Oh, gosh, I don't remember all the names now, but we have
Yeah.
read and enjoyed all of them. Unfortunately, they're back at our house in St. Louis, so we couldn't even review them for these activities. But
Oh,
we have admired Michael Carey for a long time. We heard him speak several years ago
mhm.
when Bailey's Harbor had a little bookstore that we enjoyed a lot.
Mhm.
Yes, I remember that bookstore. Yeah.
Well, it kind of makes you, when you read his books, it kind of makes you think, well, we all have lives that, there's nothing really dramatic. Well, he has drama in his life, but there, we all have lives like this that if we could write like that, we could probably put together our own chapters that would be not, similar. Clearly he's an excellent writer and observant in all these things, but we all have really interesting parts, episodes in our lives that maybe would be book worthy. if I could write like that.
Yeah.
We were talking about how he, and I consider myself, I read a lot. I consider myself to have a pretty decent vocabulary, that there were words he used that I've never heard of before. So I thought that was interesting. And Stephanie said that he has talked about, you know, that people have given him feedback about the language sometimes in his books is maybe beyond your average reader in some parts. And, you know, there were times when I was like, okay, did he really need that word? I don't even know, you know, and frankly, I don't bother to look up words anymore. I just kind of guess about what it is, you know, and move on. I'm impressed by his vocabulary, but sometimes I almost wondered if it took a little bit away from the book, because it would make me stop. You know, I'd be reading along, then I hit this word, this big, you know, $100 word. And I'm like, okay, when a $1 word would work, you know, I don't know.
Well, it's interesting that that issue has been brought up in many of the book discussions I've listened to. And to be honest, I don't remember any of those words. Maybe I'm just so used to skimming over them. And as you said, just sort of assuming, you know, making up an idea of what they mean. I'll have to go back and look at it. But he has, yeah.
Yeah, there were definitely some that I was like, wow, I don't even have a clue how to even say that word.
Yeah.
Right.
He did say that he likes to challenge people. And I think he said he works with a dictionary because he doesn't know them all himself. And it's
And I think he said
challenging
in that
thing.
movie that you showed too, that sometimes they're the bigger words, but they're the exact word that means what he wants to say. So that's why
Yeah.
he uses it.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm like, okay, but you kind
Right.
of lost a
Yeah.
few of us in the process.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, some people think the editor should have caught some of that too. Other people have mentioned that sometimes he just goes on and on and on, but that's kind of his style, right?
It is.
So you take it as it is.
And I want to go back to something else that Lisa had just said a few minutes ago, that we all probably have stories like the one that Patty just shared with us about Walt
Yes.
Disney.
Mhm.
What great stories if we could, you know, if we sat down and interviewed people here. My daughter and I were at the Sister Bay Beach, I think it was probably 2 summers ago, and we sat down next to an older gentleman who happened to be from Sister Bay, who had retired up here. And he was like an economics professor from Michigan State, and my daughter was in economics at school. And he was absolutely flabbergasted that he found somebody else who was interested in the same thing he was. And he was a fascinating man, and he had a really interesting history, and he told her a little bit about the jobs he had had. And I'm like, there are people all over Door County like that. If you sit
Yes,
down and listen
absolutely.
to them, there are a lot of great stories.
Yes, yeah. And Patty should write down her stories for her town in Missouri.
Yes.
They'd probably appreciate it. If there's a historical society. I know here we have a oral history program.
Mhm.
So those things are valuable and you want to get them down.
Yep.
You can.
Excuse me, I'm hoarse today. Our town is Marceline. It's on Highway 36, about halfway between Hannibal and St. Joe. And Walt Disney loved railroads, traveled by railroad whenever he could. He had an uncle that was a railroader when he was a little boy, and Marceline was a railroad town. They have converted that old 2-story brick depot that I walked by nearly every day of my childhood on the way to the library, the Carnegie Library, which was behind it. And the first floor is the Walt Disney Museum. They made many friends in Marceline, particularly one family that they always stayed with when they came to town. And they contributed so many things from the Disney family that are not anywhere else in the world. And the second floor is a railroad museum. So if you're ever crossing across Missouri on Highway 36, drive 3 miles south and see the Disney and Railroad Museum. It's not open in the winter, so
Well,
it have to be in the summer.
That's a good tip.
the good, dear little lady that was a childhood friend of mine and still is a friend, and was the hostess for the Disneys when they came to town so many times, is the curator of that museum, and was still there the other day when I sent a friend from Door County who was traveling visit, and she said, "Oh, we're really not open. I was just here arranging some things, but do come back in the summer." So you'd be most welcome, and it would be a lovely thing to see.
Nice. And
Laura?
speaking of, yes,
Just to touch on what you were saying about recording histories, we have the oral history kits that people can check out
yes.
to record, stories of people in Door County, or family histories, or whatever stories that
And
they
they're
want to
at-
record.
Each branch has a kit.
Yeah, and I put a link to the record in the chat for
Oh, nice. Thank
yeah.
you.
That's cool.
Rebecca. Yeah,
Thank you for doing that.
And
I think,
yeah,
Sorry.
go on.
I was just going to say, I think one thing that Michael Perry did well, and I don't remember what chapter it was in, but he was talking about buildings that were in his town that either went away or whatever. There was one particular building he was talking about, and how he couldn't imagine the town not having it. And then I think sometimes about like how the Peninsula Pulse will sometimes run an old photograph from Door County, and it'll show downtown Egg Harbor with different buildings, or maybe the same building, but it looks different to you. And it's interesting to kind of look back on some of the things that aren't here anymore in Door County, and some of the things that have morphed into something different.
Yes. Yeah. One other
Sort of
thing
tied in with that,
what was that, Patty?
sort of tied in with that, I have done a series of stories for the Pulse about old grocery stores. And I'm putting together an hour-long program on that I will give for the Door County Historical Society
Oh,
at Al
great.
Johnson's on April 25th. And for the Bailey's Harbor Historical in August. I don't remember the date, but same program, and there's quite a lot of interest in a recap of all those old stores with pictures, which Miles Stanhausen is putting together for me.
Yes. Yeah.
I've
Very
been reading all of those articles you've been writing, Patty, and they're
I
great.
have too.
because Some of those stores I didn't know
Yeah.
about.
Well,
I remember
didn't either.
Kirschers in Bellamy. I think you wrote about them.
Yes, I did. They had a store earlier, I believe, in Sturgeon Bay, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Sometimes
Yes.
you get more than you ask for. I wrote about North County old stores first, and then I got a call from a friend at the Door County Historical Museum that said, "We got a letter from a fellow whose great grandpa had a store in Southern Door. Would you consider writing about it?" And I said, "Well, do you have others?" And she sent me a list of 18 old stores in
Wow.
Sturgeon Bay and South. And so we put a little notice in the Pulse a year and a half ago in August, and said, anyone with information about these 18 stores, we'd love to hear more. I got information about 55 stores,
Wow.
which was more than I planned to write, but I did. Some of them
And-
I combined in little groups, but I love history. I love those old newspapers. You can just definitely go down a rabbit hole.
That's for
searching
sure.
for
And you know,
something
you should put all your articles together and have the Pulse, or you publish a book on the subject. That would be great.
I have thought about that, and I suggested it once, and Miles said they had just started this and that. They sort of had a lot on their plate, but I would
Yeah.
like to do that.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, Patty, you're really preserving and, like a lot of things that, again, that would be like a community hub, a store like
Yes.
that. So, all the store, anybody would probably have gone there if they lived in that community. So that's a huge thing to preserve for for history's sake.
And I get
The other-
questions about these stores too, here in the library. were asking about a grocery store right in Sturgeon Bay run by the Lemairs that was right in what's a residential area now. And then it turns out there was a store in Jacksonport with that name, and it'd be great to have that all in a reference book.
Yeah.
The other project I'm working on right now is updating the Kangaroo history book that I wrote in 2005. And I am including information about places around the lake, the Coyote, Waseda Farms, the Rushes, CYE, Max Walton, and the Boynton Chapel, and also inviting people. I think we had 112 families with write-ups in the initial book, and some of those are updating, and I'm hearing from a number of more people whose families have been on the lake a while. So, so far, this book is 100 pages longer than the last one, and I've got 5 more days people can still send in material. So we're hoping it comes out by spring.
What a great
Nice.
project.
Yes. Yeah, that's great to hear.
That's very
you-
cool.
So you're one of the people, Patty, doing some of the same things that Michael Perry's doing and writing down people's stories.
Definitely she is.
Writing and editing, yes.
That's very cool.
Oh, I love it.
Well, does anyone have any other aspect of the book you want to talk about? You can think of? This has been a fascinating discussion.
It has been.
I think we should, Patty, maybe we should have a program with you where we just talk Door County history. That would be a lot of fun in communities.
Well, I don't know all of it. I know old grocery stores. I've done a lot of writing about fascinating old people. I get those assignments from the Pulse with good reason. I'll be 88 in July. And I have truly interviewed some really amazing people and written about them. And I would love to talk about them, people that are gone and people that are not, like the fellow I wrote about last fall who was superintendent of Sebastopol for so many years. Fascinating stories. I think it was in the paper, but he met his wife. He had just finished his bachelor's degree and he'd been in the Army, and he came to Sebastopol and applied for a job as ag teacher, which he got in the summer before school started. And the former teacher took him to FFA camp or 4-H camp to meet people. And there was a woman there who was the county extension agent. And they had a delicious lunch, and he said, "These are wonderful rolls." And she said, "Oh, I baked them," which turned out not to be true. But
Good for her.
yes. Oh, she was a character too. I'll tell you about her, Ruth. But he invited her on a first date to go to Penn Players. And my husband and I are both retired educators, although I was a writer for the school district, public relations, not teaching much. And he took her a corsage for attending the play. And it featured, if I remember correctly, celery and radishes. Carrots and radishes, my husband says, something like that. Anyway, she thought a man with that sense of humor would make a good life partner. And indeed, they were married and have had a great life. Both in the 90s now. But something about her that I wrote that did not get in the paper. When she was a senior in high school, she had a sister who was a junior in college. And her parents said, excuse me, "We can't afford to have both of you in college at the same time. So you need to find a job for 1 year after high school. And then your sister will finish college and then you can go." And her bookkeeping teacher took her down to the local bank, wherever this was in Wisconsin, and they hired her. And so her parents were very happy. She could live at home and make money. And then later in the school year, a recruiter from the FBI came to visit their school. And he came in a Jeep and he was signing up what he called government girls. And any girl who signed up on the spot got to ride in the Jeep with him. And she signed up and took a job with the FBI. And on the way home, she went by the bank and resigned. And then she went home and told her parents, I won't be working at the local bank. I have a job in Washington, D.C. And her mother said, no, you are not going off to Washington. And her father said, oh, let her go. And she did. And didn't stay very many years, but she was there at the time FDR died.
Oh,
And she was in the file room and she said a lot of the agents came through and of course were sad and in shock and could not believe that Harry Truman, who also is from my home state of Missouri,
yes,
Yes.
yes.
that Truman was going to be president. They said, he can't do that. He knows nothing. And she said she assumed they were just kind of speaking in general. Discovered that was not the case. He knew nothing at all about the development of the atomic bomb. He
Mhm.
had not apparently been on intimate terms with Roosevelt. I have assumed since that he probably chose Harry as a running mate because that would pull votes from the Midwest.
Right.
And of course, Harry turned out to be a much better president than people assumed that former haberdasher from Independence would be. But I've always been
Wow.
proud of Harry. And he lived down the street from my parents when they were first married. So I don't know that they ever met him, but they saw him every day.
Mhm.
Wow. Well, these are all great stories, and it just so happens that some of Harry Truman's cabinet are from St. Louis and are up here in Door County also. Did you know
How
that?
about that?
Wow. Okay.
They have a place at Whitefish Bay.
Well,
So a lot of you St. Louis, Missouri people come up north where it's nice and cool and refreshing in the summer, right?
yeah. Well, we came on vacation in 90 and bought our college cottage in 92 and have loved every minute up here.
Yeah.
This is our second winter in Door County. Before we always
see.
went back to St. Louis for the winter, and
Mhm.
we stayed last year because of COVID, and we're here this year because we love it. We had 9 deer in our yard the other day.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the one thing I know Michael Perry explains why he's a hunter, and I have brothers who are hunters, and I grew up in Wisconsin and I understand it, but I personally like to watch the wildlife and I feed the squirrels in my yard,
Yeah.
which
we
he
do
makes fun of
too.
his neighbor, but I do feed the squirrels and I have a lot of fun watching them all run around and do silly gymnastics, trying to climb everywhere. So
Well,
that's,
ours eat most of the bird feed, but that's all right.
yeah.
Mhm.
Well, we've had a wonderful conversation here. Thank you for joining us,
Yes.
Patty, and telling us these great
Yes, thanks,
stories.
Patty.
And I hope you will
Wow.
publish a book on the grocery stores of Door County. I look forward to that, and I look forward to your other book that you have coming out soon.
Yeah.
Thank
Does
you
anyone
very
have
much.
anything to add?
No.
See,
Thanks,
Laura?
Rebecca and Laura.
Just before we go, the upcoming events we have for Door County Reads, there will be a supporting writers panel on February 10th.
Is tonight?
Yeah, tonight. Let's see, a reading of the play Population of 485 by Rogue Theater on February 11th. Let's see, and let's see, things like Hope and Faith, a Griffin String Quartet program on the 12th, and then a final book discussion on February 14th.
Well, great. And
Thank
thank you all for joining us. This has
Thank
been a
you
lot
very
of
much
fun.
for having us.
Yes, thank you.